Here, before we start, just listen to this. Just listen to this. That is the theme song to the greatest game you never played. You hang around me long enough talking video games and whatnot, and eventually you will hear me assert that the greatest video game of all time was this: Star Control 1. Not Star Control 2, though that is a great game, consistently topping best of lists, and for good reason. And when those lists are taking votes, I'll vote for Star Control 2 only because I want my vote to count. But my heart belongs to the first part of the series. Star Control is a game with a rich history full of awesome technical achievements and created a genre that, while worth duplication, would for a long time stand on its own. When I first played Star Control, it was on a bootleg 3.5-inch floppy with hacked copy protection. I carried that floppy with me in my school bag that whole year and would spend my lunches and free periods in the computer lab perfecting my skills as a starship pilot and later as a galactic strategist. Melee was where I played the game the most, and the one part of the game that most people remember fondly. Star Control's Melee was 2 fleets of 7 ships each in a battle until one fleet was wiped out. The fleets were balanced so that choosing the ship to fight with became a complex game of rock, paper, scissors. Each ship was a unique blend of 2 weapons, usually a generic forward-firing weapon and a special weapon that gave each ship a unique personality. That personality was deepened with the captain's pictures on the sidebar. This wasn't a game of 2 faceless ships fighting against each other in space. You could literally stare into the eyes of your opponent as you consigned them to a death in deep space. Assuming they had eyes. Anyways, it was fast, it was furious, it was gloriously smooth on a 386 with pixel-perfect collision detection so that near misses would make you hold your breath, and particularly fancy runs of dodges would be cut short by a random asteroid at your butt or a unexpected planetary collision. But Melee wasn't Star Control's only offering. Just a little bit further down that main menu resided the option for the full game, and herein resides the best and worst Star Control had to offer. In the full game menu, you got to choose a scenario and were given a little bit of story for the battle you'd be entering. Then you'd go to the star map, a 3D space filled with planetoids that consistently rotated so that you could get a sense of the paths that wound their way across this stage of strategy. You weren't allowed free movement on the star map. Instead, you had to plot paths from one planetoid to another to get to your destination. You literally had to unwrap the map in your mind to find out if you're following a dead end or on the road to your intended destination. You had to look for choke points that you could reinforce to stop your opponent's progress. You had to position your ships on this battlefield to match your strengths against your opponent's weakness. This was a battlefield of the mind where victory or death hung on your ability to just read the map, and that map was a brilliant technical achievement in and of itself. Unfortunately, it was also the least popular part of the game. Not for me, mind you. I loved it, but some people just couldn't get it, and so when Star Control 2 came out, that star map was gone, and that's a shame, especially when you learn the history of where Star Control came from. A history that stretches all the way back to what was arguably the first video game of all time. Now, I'm going to cut you off right now if you mention that tennis game. No, that's not a game. That was a digital toy. The first video game of all time, you have to go back to 1962. Students at MIT punched holes into a paper tape, fed that paper tape into the university's cutting-edge marvel of technology, the PDP-1, and upon its oscilloscope screen glowed to life Space War. Space War, of all the video games to be first. Those MIT guys, they didn't say, well, maybe we'll start with something simple, maybe a nice text adventure, then maybe we'll start playing with graphics. No, they went straight for the hard stuff. Graphics, rotations. They had to write sine and cosine functions and program it into the game. And as if that wasn't enough, the initial version had a random star map. That wasn't good enough for those nerds. No, they wrote it to display an actual star map with data from the actual sky and figured out how to make the stars different brightnesses so that they could be accurate to what was in the night sky, which they had to program too. But I digress. This isn't about that. In 1982, Paul Rees III and Freefall Associates produced a new type of game. They combined the strategy of chess with one-on-one combat so that you don't merely take a piece like you do in chess. You have to fight them for that position, and Archon was introduced to the world. Then, in 1990, Paul Rees III joins Fred Ford to make an Archon in space, using the combat of Space Wars and the unit variety of Archon. Hiding the name of Paul Rees III's previous work in the title, you get Archon Star Control. You see? The full game that got cut from Star Control 2 was the whole point of Star Control. Even the well-balanced fleets that the melee combat consists of smacked of strategy, and for the most part, that was gone in Star Control 2. Star Control 2 was an action RPG, which is cool, but it didn't make me think the way I had to every time I loaded up a game of Star Control 1. And I also liked the bite-sized chunks that made up Star Control 1. Star Control 1 was just plain fun. It didn't try to be an accurate simulation of space combat. It did what made sense only within the realm of the game. For instance, a ship's health is its crew count. You hit the ship with a missile and 4 crew members die while the ship itself remains in perfect working order. How does that make sense? It's pretty funny when you think about it. Or the full game, with habitable planets and dead planets all spinning around each other. Where in the universe is this supposed to take place? You know what? Who cares? The graphics are bright and colorful, not gritty and dark. But the game isn't silly or whimsical either. It just is what it is. Star Control's juxtaposition of action and strategy is just not something that we see very much. It got it from Archon, but aside from Archon and Star Control, there's been Unholy Wars, which was made by Fred Ford and Paul Rees. Oh, what, you never heard of it? No, it didn't do very well. There was Mortal Kombat Chess in one of the Mortal Kombat games. Oh yeah, it was dreadfully unpopular. Maybe I just like something that's ridiculously unpopular, but I get excited when I see games doing this. And apparently I'm the only one. And finally, the big cherry on top of an already overstuffed treat was that the full game campaigns were customizable. You could write your own campaigns and share them with friends. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you give your players a game editor, you're giving them ownership. And when you share your game like that, it will live forever and surprise even you. In this case, that's probably less true than, say, Lode Runner or Little Big Planet, but it certainly worked for me. 2 decades later, and I still get misty-eyed over this game. If I'm being completely honest, the game's not perfect. Aspects of it haven't aged well, and I might not have been as into the game if it weren't for the fact that it was just plain available to me at the time, at a very formative time of my life. But be that as it may, if you ask me today what the best game of all time is, I will still tell you, this is it. Now, if I've convinced you that you need to try this game out, well, you're going to need DOSBox, and you're going to need to find a copy of it, and it might be difficult, and it might not be worth it for you. This is a game that, in my mind, badly needs to be remade. In fact, this is a game that I've already remade in my mind. Not just remade, but like made the game that one day you will see it. But until then, this is why Star Control is always my answer for best game of all time.